During an executive family brunch, my stepfather laughed. "She'll be great one day, maybe as someone's assistant." I nodded, spent 12 years building power in silence, and the moment I controlled the family trust, I cut his pension, sold his house, and seized every asset he thought he would pass down. His descendants lost their college funds, he was sued into poverty, and the family legacy now lists his era as the collapse years in public business histories. I was 24 when it happened. Fresh out of school, hair done right, blouse steamed, heels on, trying to act like I belonged at the table. It was a family brunch at the country club in Edina, Minnesota. Not a holiday, just one of those executive family gatherings Ronald loved to host, so he could parade around like a king. My stepfather Ronald had been in my life since I was 16. My real dad died in a car crash, and within a year, Ronald had moved in. He married my mom the following summer and stepped into my father's place like the role was written for him. He had a thick jaw, loud laugh, wore those sports coats that were always a little too tight across the chest. He talked over people, especially women. That day, as we all sat down to eat, he stood up for a little speech. Typical Ronald. Toast, little jokes, patting backs. When he got to me, he smiled wide. "Rachel just finished her fancy degree. She's all grown up now. Who knows? Maybe she'll make a great assistant one day." Laughter. The board members chuckled. My uncle clapped his hands like Ronald had just made the joke of the century. Even my mother smirked, eyes down on her mimosa, like she didn't want to make it worse. I didn't laugh. I just smiled, nodded like I was okay with it. I wasn't. I kept smiling through dessert, through the goodbyes, through Ronald slapping me on the back and telling me to go get him, Tiger. But the whole time my stomach was burning. That was the moment it started. I told myself, you don't have to clap back today. Just wait. One day you'll have the power. And I waited. For a while I really did what they expected. Got a job in marketing at one of our family firms in downtown Minneapolis. Took notes in meetings. Scheduled other people's Zoom calls. Planned the company holiday parties. I played along. But I wasn't idle. I took night classes. I got my CPA. I applied to MBA programs and got into the University of Chicago. Ronald told people I was going for an online certificate or something. Like he couldn't even be bothered to get the details right. I kept my head down, moved to Chicago, worked for a hedge fund. Long hours, fast environment, sharp elbows, but I learned fast. I started managing portfolios, then entire client accounts. I made friends. Quiet ones. Ones with law degrees, private equity backgrounds, trust accounting experience. I didn't wear our family name on my sleeve. I wanted people to see me, not the reputation attached to it. Back home, Ronald was playing the big man, making speeches at charity galas, funding pet projects, buying ridiculous things like a business retreat cabin that was really just a massive lake house for him and his friends. He liked to talk about legacy like he built something from nothing. Truth was, everything he touched was handed to him. The family trust, the business connections, the properties, it was all there before him. Built by my great-grandfather, then my father. Ronald just married in. Then he acted like it was his name on the foundation. My dad's will had very clear instructions. When I turned 35, my share of the trust would become active. 40%, no contest. Until then, it was held in a type of trust that required board oversight. Ronald had used that time to push me to the background and make himself the center. But what he didn't know was how many people hated him. Quietly, silently. Employees, board members, minor shareholders, they'd all watched him spend, mismanage, and lie. So I started reaching out. I bought out 2 of the smaller shareholders. Not with trust money, with my own. They were old family friends who knew my father didn't like how things were going. I took over their 7% and promised them a seat at the table once things changed. I also hired an outside auditor. Not one of Ronald's guys. A team from Denver. Independent, tough, discreet. By the time I turned 35, I had a thick file: mismanaged funds, illegal transfers, properties used for personal gain, unapproved loans to sketchy offshore accounts. It was all there on paper, black and white. I flew home. Walked into the family office on Hennepin Avenue. Wore a navy suit, no makeup, no fanfare. Sat down in the conference room and handed the folder to our general counsel. I didn't need to yell. I had the numbers. I called a board meeting. Ronald came in late, acting casual like he owned the place. Made a joke about how I must be asking for a promotion. Instead, I handed out packets. I told them what I had. Then I told them I now held 47% of the trust. My mother, who had quietly separated from Ronald after years of pretending to be fine, signed over her voting rights to me. Then I called the vote. Ronald was removed. Unanimously. Even his allies couldn't back him with the evidence laid out. Next, I froze his pension, terminated the lease on his lake house, sold the retreat cabin, and returned the profits to the trust. All of it was legal. All of it airtight. He cursed. Called me a vindictive little bitch. Threatened lawsuits. I handed him a copy of the one we had already filed against him. Breach of fiduciary duty, embezzlement, misuse of trust assets. It moved quickly after that. The courts took the case seriously. His accounts were frozen. The shell companies he'd used were forced to disclose records. The country club cut ties. Former employees came forward. We liquidated several of his failed ventures. Sold off the investments he made in his grandkids' side businesses. Recovered what we could. The worst part for him was when the family business publication came out. We publish it every 5 years, a formal report that goes to libraries, colleges, investors, even the media. This year we added a new chapter. The collapse years, 2009 to 2021. It detailed Ronald's mismanagement, the lawsuits, the loss in value, the damage to the family name. His face is on page 3. My face is on page 6, labeled, The Turnaround. Last I heard, Ronald was renting a condo in Duluth, teaching community college courses, driving a 10-year-old Ford. His grandkids didn't get into college, the funds were gone, and I didn't replace them. My mother now lives peacefully in Michigan. Quiet lake house, no drama. She sends me birthday cards again. And me? I run the family trust now. Every deal goes through me. Every board vote needs my signature. I wasn't anyone's assistant. I was the architect of his collapse. You'd think that would be the end. That after everything I took from Ronald, his position, his properties, his reputation, he'd go quiet. That he'd finally understand I wasn't someone to be laughed at. That he'd disappear into whatever sad little corner he could afford. But no. Men like him don't go quiet. They look for cracks to crawl back through. It started small. Anonymous tips to regulators. Claims of insider trading in the trust. Suddenly we were getting calls from the IRS, the SEC. All triggered by someone filing whistleblower reports. They didn't go anywhere. Everything in the trust had been scrubbed clean, but the timing was too perfect. Then came the podcast. One of those corruption in America's elite families shows. Ronald showed up on an episode under the name Randy. His voice disguised, but not enough. He spun this story about a vengeful stepdaughter who used dirty tricks to steal her family's empire. Claimed I falsified records, blackmailed board members, manipulated my mother when she was emotionally vulnerable. That one burned. I wasn't angry he lied, I expected that. What pissed me off was how fast people believed it. Even people who'd sat in meetings with Ronald, watched him throw money down the drain. People who knew the truth, they started questioning me. Whispering. Maybe Rachel pushed it too far. I started getting anonymous emails. We know what you did. You're next. That kind of crap. It didn't scare me, but it told me Ronald wasn't done. The worst came from inside. My cousin Theo, who'd never held a real job in his life, was furious that his college fund was gone. He'd spent years coasting off Ronald's handouts, planning to start his own VC firm in LA. He blamed me for everything. Never mind that Ronald used the funds to bankroll a fake crypto exchange. Never mind that the trust barely recovered what was left. Theo started talking to reporters. One piece called me cold and calculating. Another claimed I exploited a grieving mother to take control. It was all lies, but it started to snowball. A few board members started pulling away. Old friends of my dad. They didn't like the bad press. One even asked if I'd consider stepping back, for the sake of appearances. That one hurt, because I'd kept the receipts. I'd done the math. I saved the trust from collapse. But it didn't matter. Some people just didn't like that the person who did it wasn't a man. I thought about walking away. Let them run it into the ground again, see how far they got. But I didn't. Because if I stepped away, Ronald would win. Maybe not financially, but in the eyes of the people who still mattered, he'd come out looking like the victim. And I wasn't going to let that happen. I dug deeper. My attorneys found a paper trail. Ronald didn't think anyone would find falsified tax documents from 5 years back. Not just shady, criminal. Enough to put him behind bars if prosecuted. I had a choice. Report him and let the feds handle it, or use it. I used it. I paid him a visit. Duluth. His cheap condo smelled like old takeout and mildew. He opened the door wearing sweatpants, and that same smug smirk he always wore around me. "You here to gloat?" he said. "No," I said. "I'm here to end this." I handed him a folder. Inside were copies of the falsified filings, emails, even the bank account transfers. "You keep pushing," I said. "This goes straight to the IRS, and you'll serve time." He laughed. "You think I care? I've already lost everything." I looked at him, really looked at him. Greasy hair, stained shirt, a fridge behind him that was half empty. And it hit me, he had lost everything. But he still thought he could take something from me, my name, my credibility, my future. "You haven't lost enough," I said. Then I walked out. 2 weeks after that visit to Duluth, my mother called me. First time in months. Her voice was shaking. "He showed up at the house, Rachel." She meant the lake house in Michigan. Her safe place. I'd put it in her name with the trust's legal team backing it. It was hers, free and clear, or so I thought. He said it was still his. Said he paid for the deck renovations back in 2017. So technically he invested in the property. I nearly dropped the phone. "He tried to get in," she said. I locked the door. He stood outside for 15 minutes just shouting. I called the police in the township. They picked him up on trespassing. But since she didn't press charges, said she was too scared, to they let him go with a warning. That night, I booked a security firm to install cameras, motion lights, and panic buttons at the lake house. Then I sent my mother a one-way ticket to a private wellness center in Arizona for a while. She needed space. Ronald had gotten under her skin again. The last time he made her feel small like that. She stayed married to him for 10 years too long. I wasn't going to let him push her back into silence. It was clear now. Ronald was never going to quit. So I went deeper. I hired an investigator, not some internet sleuth. This guy used to track fraudsters for the Treasury. Took him 3 weeks to find something I never expected. Ronald had an offshore account in Belize. One I didn't know about. Turns out, he siphoned money years ago, before the first wave of bad real estate deals. Before the lawsuits, and parked it overseas. It was small by trust standards, but enough to keep him afloat if he wanted to disappear. Nearly $2.7 million. And here's the kicker. He hadn't hidden it for retirement. He was using it to pay off former family employees. Bribes. Loyalty retainers. I recognized one of the names, Maria, our old office manager from the Minneapolis branch. She was on his payroll. She'd been feeding him updates about internal meetings, board decisions, and press outreach strategies. The betrayal stung. She used to bake me cookies when I was 10. Called me her little CEO when I'd follow my dad around the office. I didn't call her. I didn't give her a chance to lie. Instead, I had the trust legal team file a motion to freeze her accounts too, based on conspiracy to undermine trust management and collusion with the litigant. She'd signed NDAs when she retired. Violating them came with a price. Meanwhile, the press pressure ramped up again. A columnist in St. Paul started digging into our trust's history. She wrote a puff piece about Ronald as a misunderstood steward, claiming I had single-handedly destroyed a generational network out of spite. She interviewed Theo. He went on record saying I had no loyalty to blood. I called Theo. I told him if he spoke publicly again, I'd open his tax filings to the same scrutiny I gave Ronald's. I had every document, every fake invoice, every check he wrote to consultants, who were really just poker buddies getting paid to be on payroll. Theo cried. Actually sobbed. That part didn't feel good. But I hung up anyway. Around this time I started getting strange calls. Not threats. Just questions. "Rachel? This is Eric from Harper & Dade. We were wondering if you're planning to transition out of your leadership roles soon. Another. Hi, just checking, is the trust looking to bring in outside oversight? We heard some of the legacy board members are looking for stability. I knew what was happening. Ronald or someone working for him was leaking rumors that I was losing control, that I was going to step down, that the board was in chaos. It wasn't true, not yet. But enough doubt and the big firms would start treating us like weak stock. It was psychological warfare. I called a press conference. First one I'd ever done.
No PR handlers.
Just me, a simple statement, and a pile of documented evidence we submitted as an online archive. It showed Ronald's actions over 12 years. The transfers, the fake LLCs, the bribes, even the offshore account. We made it public. I ended the conference with one sentence. I do not fear the truth. Can the same be said for those who speak against it? That statement went viral in the financial press. Within 2 days, 3 law firms issued apologies for their earlier public doubts. 2 board members who had gone quiet called me and apologized. And Ronald? He went into hiding. No phone records. No credit card usage. Not even at the Duluth condo. Gone. 2 months passed. No sign of Ronald. Not in Duluth. Not in Belize. Not even from the people I knew were still quietly loyal to him. It was like he vanished off the map. I kept the trust stable. We closed out 2 risky ventures he had started before the takeover. Paid out modest dividends to shareholders. Strengthened oversight. It was the calmest the business had been in years. But I didn't feel calm. I felt like I was waiting. Then out of nowhere I got a letter. Not an email, a real physical envelope. Handwritten. No return address. Postmarked in Florida. Inside was a single page. It read, "You think you've won. You haven't. I'll be remembered. You'll be forgotten. You buried the family name for your own pride. That legacy dies with you." I stared at it for a long time. Then I lit a match and burned it. That letter was my warning. I should have seen what was coming next. 1 week later, I got a call from our bank's fraud department. They flagged an unusual login attempt on one of our high-security family trust accounts, an access point no one but I should have had. I rushed down to the family office. Pulled security footage. Someone had been in the building. It was Maria. She still had a keycard. I'd forgotten to revoke it after freezing her accounts. My mistake. She hadn't just tried to steal money. She downloaded sensitive files, shareholder info, real estate contracts, even internal communications with legal teams. And then she vanished too. Less than 72 hours later, private financial records started showing up online. An anonymous website began publishing trust files. Nothing illegal but deeply personal. How much we paid our trustees, private disputes over past deals, even old emails I sent to my mom venting about Ronald. The press jumped on it. Suddenly I was the target again. Not because I did anything wrong, but because Ronald's side made it look like I had secrets worth hiding. The real twist? The site was traced back to Belize. Hosted offshore. Registered under a fake shell corporation. But one of our IT guys found a tiny mistake in the site's code, a leftover tag with the name of the original file uploader. Ronald Briggs 72. He did it himself. We had enough evidence now. More than enough. I turned it all over to federal authorities, the money trail, the offshore accounts, the hacked files, the website. Everything. The FBI opened a full-scale investigation. And once they started digging, they didn't stop. They found fake passports, identity fraud, hidden accounts in the Cayman Islands, money Ronald had taken from the trust, and moved so far off-grid, even I hadn't known it was missing. He'd been preparing this escape for years. I testified in front of a grand jury. So did 3 of our board members. It took 6 months, but they issued an international warrant. Ronald was arrested trying to cross into Panama by boat. He was extradited to the U.S. in handcuffs. The photo made every local paper. Balding, thin, sunburned. Nothing like the man who once wore tailored suits and barked orders at brunch tables. He pled guilty to multiple counts of financial fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. He tried to speak at sentencing. Claimed he was framed. The judge cut him off. Maria was sentenced to 5 years for her part in the breach.
Theo?
He disappeared to Arizona. Nobody's heard from him since his name got leaked in the investigation. As for me, I stayed. I led. I rebuilt. But I also paid a price. Some cousins won't speak to me. The trust name is clean, but my name will always carry the scars of this war. I made mistakes too, missed signs, trusted the wrong people, held on to quiet anger too long. But I'd do it all again. Because when Ronald laughed at me that day, told a room full of people I might be someone's assistant, he planted something I never let go of. Now his name is in prison logs. And mine is on the trust's wall, carved in stone. Chairwoman Rachel Ward, 2021 to present. Architect of the rebuild.